Begin the current Daf in Mesechtes Kesuvos Daf Nun Aleph. We begin on the second line down at the top of the Amud, where our Gemara continues the discussion regarding the Banas Yizainu. We're talking about the Tanai Ksuba. One of them is that the daughters get fed after the father passes away. So our Gemara continues regarding the discussion, what is she allowed to collect from? Specifically what we're discussing right now is that of, is it only by karka or is it even by metal? Sure, it corresponds to the concept of Mecheskel, turning to Daf Chaim. Krishna is joining with today's Daf. Some of the things we're discussing in today's Daf are a man who did not provide his wife with a written ksuba, that's the theme of the next Mishnah, and or omitted certain stipulations of the ksuba, that he's still obligated to provide a complete ksuba, because it's a stipulation of the courts, it's one of the conditions in the ksuba, even if it wasn't actually written. The Gemara brings the source for the halacha that Eish Yisrael shenensa muteres labala. If a wife of a regular Yisrael was violated, then she's permitted to her husband. In contrast to Eish Kohen shenensa, that's interesting halacha that if she's a wife of a kohen and she was violated, that she's actually asura labala. The Gemara brings the source of that. Also, the Gemara discussed regarding tchilas v'aynis b'sefer b'ratzim. If originally it starts off as a situation of being violated, and then she does it consensually, what the halacha is going to be in that situation. Tonight, ksuba is the concept of, like we said, regarding the conditions of a ksuba. Some of them are, let's say, for example, that all his properties are, there's a lien on them for the ksuba. That's inherent, that's a tonight, that's a stipulation of the ksuba. That he has to redeem her, she's taken in captivity. That he has to heal her. So, like we said in the previous stuff, we were discussing a machlekes regarding a Tanai Ksuba of abundance yizayin. One of the stipulations when he passed away, the daughters that they have together are entitled to mezayim. So we had a machlekes. Rav Amnuna said in abundance nidayin silam mekarka. Just like we compare it to the Tanai Ksuba of benin dichrin, that the male sons inherit our ksuba, that's only from karka, as we'll explain later on in the Masechta, so too the bonus are only the zaynis from the karka. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg said no, bonus on the zaynis even from minamatatlan, from the movable items. That's our Gemara continues now, first illustrating with a story, as the Gemara on Daf Nun Aleph, 2 lines down, but the Amud begins. There was an orphan and a female orphan. There's a brother and a sister, and their assets were in the hand of a caretaker. So the Asa coming to the Rabba, they came from the Rabba where they needed their stipend. Samlu Rabba said to them, Helu liyasam, go give more food for the yasam, for the male orphan son, b'shvil yisayma, because that his sister can be fed with him. So on that, the Rabbi said to the Rabba, but you the master, you say, and this brought later on, you could only collect from karka, from real estate, not from movable items, for what? Whether it be for the sustenance of the girls, whether it be for the ksuba, and parnasa, whether it be for the nedunya. But one thing is, we see one of the cases is mezayne is not from metatlan. So how are you saying get more food for the sister who is the chiv of mezaynes, but that's metatlan, and you don't collect from metatlan for mezayne? So he said to them, you're right. You won't. I'm not telling you to take the food for the girl for herself, for her chiv of mezaynes. He says, I'm actually doing it for the yasam. Because ilu ratza shivcha l'shamshay, if the boy would be looking for a maidservant to serve him, Milo even wouldn't we give it to him? It's his rights, even though the caretaker has to decide what the orphan should get. Obviously, he needs a maid, someone to help him out. Koshkin hocha de for sure. Here he has two. He has his sister, and she can help him out and serve and take care of the dishes and move. So therefore, the actually providing her for the sustenance is not because of her mezainis. You're right. That's only mekarkoy. But here, his sister will function definitely doubling as a maid helping him out, and therefore that's why you should provide more food for the sister. Now, this thing that is actually machlekes tanoim, but we brought from the previous daf, machlekes amaram, if the collection of mezainis, which is one of the tanai ksuba for the girl, is from karka or even from metalin, so now the Gemara brings a brisa that has it as a machlekes tanoim. Turn about the brisa. Whether we're talking about properties that have insurance, that's always a term used for karka. Whether it be properties that there's no responsibility for because it could get lost, it gets stolen, whatever it is. But so it's essentially whether karka or whether metalin, the halacha of the Tanakama is meitzian, you extract from the orphans, from the boys, lamazan isha, to provide for food for the wife, for the widow, ulabanis, and for the daughters. That's the Rebbe. So according to Rebbe, even metalin, which are nechasim shein machrayis, you will collect for the girls. Shimon Elazar, he says no. His wording is a little bit more detailed, but essentially what we're going to see is he holds that no, you only give karka for the girls, you don't give metal. So this machlekes amarim is a machlekes tanoim. But in his words, there's a few different ideas mentioned. He says nechasim shesh l'machrais. If it's karka, that's mitzin labanis min aban. Okay, that you can extract for the girls from the boys, for mazainis, for food, by karka, and for parnasa for their nad. Now he adds on more words. He says ulabanis, and for the younger girls, min abanis from the older girls. Meaning, let's say this guy only died and he only had girls, and he left the older girls in charge of the estate. So the younger girls could remove from the older girls so that they divide it equally. As Rashi points out, here we're not talking about mazainis, obviously, because girls don't get fed from girls because they're all the same in the Yerusha. It's only when the boys have the Yerusha, they're the ones, because boys inherit, not the girls, so then the girls get fed from the estate. But when there's only girls, they're all splitting the Yerusha equally. So when saying bandas min abanas doesn't mean regarding mazainis, because no one's getting mezainis, we're all splitting equally. It means to say that the bandas could go ahead and demand from the older girls that we divide this equally, even though with the younger, we're only 7, they could extract from them. And so to the banim, the younger boys, minabanim from the older boys, again, they could also extract from them to demand that it be divided equally. And this is again by karka. Ulabanim and abanis, and the boys from the girls, b'nechasim merubim. When there's a large estate, so then again the boys could extract it from the girls because they get it, not the girls. Now, Aval, but not the boys and the girls when there's very little in the estate. Meaning, if you don't have enough, the father passed away, left over very little, that is not enough to feed both the boys and the girls until they become boygros, until they become adults, where the rabbis say the girls actually get fed and the boys have to go knocking on doors to provide for themselves. So that's what they're saying. The boys don't take away from the girls when there's very little left. Now that's regarding the chasim shesh l'machrais, regarding karka. Then says Rabbi Shimon Lazar, nechasim she'ein l'machrais, regarding metaltlin. There's no insurance on metaltlin. It can get lost in a second. You leave your phone somewhere, it's gone. You don't see it ever again. Meitzin labanim min abanim. So here also, again, the younger boys can take it away from the old, meaning can extract from the older boys, go and split equally, because that's also part of the Yerusha. All the bandas min abanim is the same thing. That's also for Yerusha purposes. The younger girls could demand from the older girls one divided equally. All the bandas min abanim, and obviously the boys take away from the girls because the boys get the inheritance, not the girls. Avaloi, and this is the punchline, but the girls cannot extract from the boys because he holds that mezainis is only from Bekarkoim and not metal. So we see the machlekes is a machlekes tanoim in this brisa. The Gemara concludes this discussion by saying, although we generally rule, we rule like Rabbi when he disagrees with his disputant. Here, however, that we don't collect the mezainis from metatlim. Why? The teaching that we started off with. The Amar Rava, because Rava says, and Rava is a basroi, so we pass him like Rava, that Hilchas halacha is mekarkoi v'loim metatlim, we collect only from real estate, not from movable items. Bein l'ksuba, bein l'mazayni, bein l'mahanasa, which is when Taisus discusses, it says l'maisa in today's times it's different. We ultimately do rely on metatlim. It's not the same as it used to be, but in the Ikra Din from the Gemara, they're saying that we rule like this opinion that you only collect from a karkoi and not from a metatlim. With that way, we continue with the next Mishnah that it continues on the theme of the ksuba, which we're discussing in the prior Mishnah is Tanoi ksuba, the ksuba, and now the Mishnah discusses more of that. It says the Mishnah, leikasav leksuba. Let's say a man did not write for his wife a ksuba. Even so, the sula gaiva masai. The virgin is going to get 200 zuz when she gets divorced, the widow. And the widow is going to get 100. Why? And they shoot tonight besin. Again, it's a stipulation of the court. Even if you didn't write it, that is a mandate that has to be fulfilled. Now, let's say let's say he wrote for her that you're going to get a field worth 100 tachas masayim zuz in place of 200 zuz. But like kasav law, and he didn't write for her kol nechasim the isli, all the properties that they have achran l'ksuba are responsible for your ksuba. Chayiv, he's going to be obligated that all his estate is going to be responsible, and he can't tell her, look, you're only going to get this field of the ksuba that I wrote for you in the document of the ksuba. No. Should tonight Bezin again, because that's a stipulation of the court that she has to get 200. I mean, if you wrote this field of 100, or you didn't write anything, you have to give her the 200, and that's a stipulation that his assets have a lien on it for the ksuba. Let's say he didn't write to her, Im tishtaboy frikinach. That if you get taken as a captive, I'm going to redeem you. And by svinach li into that I'm going to take you back as a wife, or ubekehenis. What's by kehenis, as we'll discuss in the Gemara, he can't take her back when she's taken as a captive, because Eishes Kohen, even in Shenenza, is a surah labala. So he writes her, "Oh, I'll redeem you and ahadrinach lemedinasich, and I'll take you back to your country, because the Eishes Kohen is forbidden to her husband if she's nenza." So let's say he didn't write this. He didn't write to the Eishes Yisrael that I'll take you back home. He didn't write to the Eishes Kohen, I'll take you back to your father's house. Chayiv, he's still obligated to redeem her. Why should I? And again, that's a stipulation of the court that you have to fulfill these requirements, and even if you didn't write the Ksubah, you didn't write this Tanoim, it doesn't make a difference, you're still going to be obligated. Now, Nishbis, if she's taken in captivity, Chayiv L'Taisi has to redeem her. Now, but, Bim Amar, let's say he tells her, Haregita b'Ksubasa, look, here's your get, here's your Ksubah, B'tiftes Atzmo, go redeem yourself. Says the Mishnah in Yerusha, you're not allowed to do that. Why? Because the way Rashi says the lumdus is that the obligation of redeeming her happened the moment she was taken into captivity. Your obligation already started at that point. You can't go try to get yourself out of it now by giving her a get next to say, I'm not married to you. Take your take your get and you go do take care of yourself. You can't, just get an obligation. Laksa, let's say the woman gets some type of illness. So Chayav L'Defa'isa, he has to heal her because, as we'll see actually in the Gemara, and Rashi says this over here, that medicine, therapy is the same as mezainis. So just like he has the obligation to feed his wife, he has the obligation to treat her, to get her the medicine and the therapy that she needs. But here, in contrast to what we said before, if let's say Amar, he says, Arigita b'ksubasa. Let's say he says, look, here's your hard get, and here's a ksuba. So now Besat let her heal herself. Rasha, he's actually allowed to, and the person does not have to feed his gerusha. So just like healing is like feeding, you're allowed to, up until that, you're always feeding her. You're allowed to say, I'm not going to feed you anymore. I could divorce you and take your ksuba. So healing is the same thing. It's the same thing as food, and when you're divorced, no obligation to feed you. It's not like something I was already obligated, like by Ishtaboi when she was taking captivity, that you have to redeem her, and you can't get out of it now. But here, food is a constant thing. This medicine is a constant thing, as we'll see, and therefore, he's allowed to go ahead and get out of it that way. So the Gemara says, Mani, who's the talking about Mishnah? What's the question? So the Gemara explains why. That Remeir, it seems to be Remeir. Because the Amar, he says, the opening halacha of the Mishnah was that if you didn't write a ksuba, I don't care, you have to have a ksuba of 200 zuz for the bisula and 100 for the amman. That's Remeir. The Amar that he says, if a person diminishes from the virgin from 200 or the amman from 100, and here's a bilas nus, says that is considered like you had a bia of znus because you didn't fulfill what has to be done. You have to have a ksuba of 200 or of 100 for almana. And if not, it's like you had a bia of znus. So why are we saying it's Remeir? Because the Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda, he actually says, and this machlekes Remeir, Rabbi Yehuda is brought later on in Perek Alpha P on the Nidalma Beis. He says, not sure. Ratz of a person who wants to, he could write for the Basula a document of 200, and Vihika said, you know what she could write? His kabalti mimchamana, which is not the case, but she could write, I already received from you 100 out of the 200. Or let's say he married a widow, he could write the ksuba of 100. But Vihika said, she could write, his kabalti mimchamana says, I already received from you 50 zuz, like a terminology of it, like a receipt, even though she didn't receive it. Now, according to Mayor, she cannot pardon her rights when she's still married to him. So our Mishnah that says that if he didn't write a ksuba, she could collect a full ksuba, the Gemara is assuming, even if she's meichel, no, she's still going to get it. Who's that like? Remeir, because Remeir says you can't be meichel, or else you're like having znus. You have to have this. Rabbi Yehuda says no, she could write, even the married, I already received, oh, me, I don't owe you? No, you only owe me half. So that's not our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that you have to pay that amount, even if she's meichel. Seems to be like Remeir, not like Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to have an obligation of 200 zuz. So the Gemara says the problem with that is, yes, the opening halacha sounds like Remeir, but Ima Seifa. Look at the next part of the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Kasla sab the shab monatat from the sign zuz. Let's say he wrote for a field that's worth 100 zuz in place of the ksuba that she's going to collect of 200 zuz. And like Kasla didn't write for her, like kol nechasim this the achrayim ksuba that all my assets have insurance to pay up for your ksuba of 200 zuz. Chayev, he's still going to be obligated, because there's still a lien on his assets. Why? Tonight best said the Mishnah, because it's a stipulation of the Gemara assumes right now, as Rashi explains, that the obligation of the Mishnah, what it's saying, is in all the halachas of shibud. What does that mean, all the halachas of shibud? It's as if it's written in the document that there is a lien on all my assets. Now the significance of that is if let's say he sells off from his assets, that she could collect from the kuchis. That's what a charayis is. Charayis is that there's insurance and like there's a lien on my property. Whatever happens, okay, someone buys, now you can collect from him. That's what it seems like the Gemara is assuming from the Mishnah. Problem is, a son of Rabbi Yehuda, that's like Rabbi Yehuda and not like Rabbi Meir. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda says, if you have a document that it was not written in the acharayis, it didn't say that there's insurance on this deal. That's not with the intention of the lender. That is rather to'i saferhu. The lender, of course, wouldn't be lending money without a lien on the borrower's property. That must have been the scribal error, and it's as if it is written in that loan document, and then the lender could collect from Meshubadim. That's Rabbi Yehuda holds. Because the Ida may, if you think that our Mishnah is like a mayor, he says he says that if there's lacking insurance, if there's no lien on the property, that's not a scribal error. That means to say that you don't have insurance. Where do we find that? There's not, we learn the Mishnah about Metzia. The Mishnah says, let's say someone finds a loan document, finds a deed on the ground, he finds that this guy owes this guy $1,000. So, as the Gemara continues in base, if there's yesh ben achrayis nechasim, if there is a shibud, if the document says that the borrower's estate is indebted to the lender, the halacha is lo yachzir. You don't return, the one who finds it does not return this document to the lender, even if the borrower agrees that he owes the money to the lender. Why? Because the courts will be allowing the lender to collect from the collateral that was sold off by the borrower to other people, which the Gemara explains over there in Bab Metzia, that we're concerned. What are we concerned about? That really the borrower paid up the lender, and really the document fell from the borrower. Why is the borrower admitting to the lender, oh, it must have fell from you because I owe you this money? It's what's called an atzas kenunya. It's a trick. It's a scheme that they want to collect from those who bought from the borrower, and they're going to divide it between themselves. Which, although you could always do that, the Gemara makes it sound like that only when we have a concern, when we have something suspicious over here that we found it on the floor, then we already start suspecting things. We don't generally suspect that, but when we find on the floor, like, what's it doing? And he says, yeah, it's his. No, we're not going to return it to the lender because they're going to collect from those who bought from the borrower. But if let's say there's no lien on this collection, then you have to return to the lender. Because the court is not going to collect from the nechasim mishabadim. So no one's going to lose over here. The borrower is admitting. So good, give it back to the lender. Let him collect from the borrower. That's divrei meir. But the chachamim, they say no. Even if there's no insurance written on the document, don't return it to the lender. You know why? Because the court actually will collect from the nechasim mishabadim. What do you mean? It doesn't say in it. It doesn't have a chrayis. Oh, because a chrayis is the toy sefer. It's a scribal error, and you could collect from mishabadim. The Lekuchas are going to lose out. Now, Rashi says, who generally is disputing Rabbi Meir? It should be Yehuda, who was with him, who was in his generation. So you see that Rabbi Meir holds Achrayis is not Toy Sefer. Rabbi Yehuda holds Achrayis is Toy Sefer. So the Gemara concludes the question, comes out that the Reisha of our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is the one that says you have to have a full Kesuvos of 200 zuz. And that's what our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah says, I don't care if you didn't write, whatever you told less, it doesn't make it, you got to give 200. That's Rabbi Meir. V'seifa, Rabbi Yehuda. Who's the one that says achrayis is toy sefer? Meaning, we said one of the cases the Mishnah was if the guy doesn't write in his kesuba kol nechasai achrayin loch, doesn't make a difference. You are achrayis. That's achrayis toy sefer. You're saying that even though you didn't write it, you're still going to be obligated. Who holds that? Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Meir. So who's the Talmud Mishnah? That Reisha sounds like Rabbi Meir and the Sefer sounds like Rabbi Yehuda from two different halachas, but it seems to be a contradiction. Says the Gemara, if you're going to say Kol Remehi, no, the whole Mishnah is Remeir. And the Shanin Remeir ben Ksuba l'Shtari Remeir differentiates between the Ksuba document and other documents. Meaning, although you're right, you just quoted me Mishnah Mitzvah that Remeir holds that by a regular star, we don't say Achrayis Tali Sefer. We say, but you didn't put an Achrayis, there's no Achrayis, you cannot collect the Mishnah Badim. But by a Ksuba, he would hold that Achrayis as Tali Sefer. For some reason, he would hold that a Ksuba, that for sure we know that you can collect from the lien, the sold off assets of the husband, maybe because that would be a Tnai Ksuba. It says the Gemara, Mishanble, does Remeir really differentiate? But Tanya, but I'll bring you a brisa, I'll prove to you that it's Remeir, and that Remeir holds that you don't say Achrayis Tai Sefer even on the Ksuba. Because the brisa says the following halacha. There are 5 cases that the collection could only be if there are available assets by the one that owes you the money, then you could collect. But if not, you cannot collect these items from what's called nechasim mishabad. Although the debt was owed to you, let's say from 10 years ago, and then he subsequently sold off properties, you cannot collect that debt from the nechasim mishabad, only from what he has available in his possession. What are these? Ve'elohein. There are peidos u'shvach peidos. What does this mean? Mishnah Masechtas Gittin Daf Memches base tells us you cannot collect the consumption of peidos and shvach karkois, the benefit of the land from the chasim mishabadim, because of tikkun oilam. What does that mean? So the Gemara B'Matzir Vidam Beis explains what is the case of achilas peidos and shvach karkois is if let's say someone stole a field from his friend, then that ganev, that gazan sold it to someone else. That guy did it unwittingly. He has his field, and he's improving it, he's putting in his trees, he's moving in, you see these guys, and they put in all these things, and they're making this and that. And then, the original owner comes and says, hey, this is my field. So now the guy's taking back what was rightly his field, together with whatever the buyer had increased, fertilizing it, plowing it, with all the papers that grew on it. So the halacha is that, yes, the victim takes it back, but now when the buyer goes back to the seller who sold it to him with insurance, he could collect the principal from the chasim mishabad, from even the sold off properties of the seller who was a gazan. But the shvach, what he increased the value of the property, that's only from the chasim nechard, not mishabad. Why? What shaykhs? Why not? That's something, a loss that's owed to him from the gazan. That's tikkun olam. What's tikkun olam? Why is that for the benefit of the world? Because that has no set amount. A buyer from that seller, some other buyer, doesn't know to be careful. I mean, if let's say you know that this guy sold a field before you worth $10,000, you realize that if something goes wrong, you bought afterwards, there's an insurance, he's responsible, and if they can't collect from him, they're coming after you. But stuff like shvach that this guy's going to invest, he's going to put in some hot tub, and so I don't know how much he's going to spend on it. I'll never buy from anyone because I don't know what they're going to come after me for. I need to know what to be careful for. So peidos and shvach peidos, which is the benefit that was made by a buyer, that cannot be collected from other later buyers because that tikkun olam, you don't know what to do to be careful of that. That's one thing. It can only be collected from nochasim b'nei chayrin, from that which is available. A second one is, if someone accepts the responsibility to feed his stepson or his stepdaughter, that she also cannot collect, she cannot collect from the chasim mishabadim, because that's also not a set amount, and it's not written. It's not set. We don't know how much you're giving to this, that you took responsibility. Now, Rashi says, the Gemara says later on of Kuf Alman Beis in Parakah Noisei, that she actually gets fed his stepdaughter from the chasim mishabadim because she's like a creditor. So the Gemara explains over there, Nafka Beis Ma Beis, that's talking about where there was a kinyan that was made from him. Where generally a kinyan is written down. So it's written down, so then it's a documented thing, so people know about it, so then you can collect from the Chaz Mishabat. But generally, if you took upon yourself to feed your stepdaughter and your stepson, that could only be from what he has available, not from the Chaz Mishabat. Another case is V'get Chayv, which Rashi actually explains the word get doesn't mean just a divorce document. All stars are called get. So a document of a debt, she'ein bo yachrayis, who's that? Who says that a document that does not have insurance cannot be collected from the Chaz Mishabad, and that's Remeir. If it doesn't say yachrayis, so then you cannot collect from the Chaz Mishabad. And another case is Uksubas isha she'im ba'achrayis. A ksuba of a wife that doesn't say that the husband has responsibility also cannot be collected mechas mishpat, only mechas nechayim. Says the Gemara, Man Shamlei the Amar, who's the one that we know, that we already are on record from the Mishnah Bava Metzia recorded on the bottom of Amar Aleph, that says, Achrayis lav toy sefer, who's the one that holds in general? If you didn't write that you were taking responsibility, that's not a scribal error, you're actually not going to be able to collect mechas mishpat. That's Remeir, and that's who this Tana is saying, a get chayv shem achrayis cannot be collected, because according to Yehuda you could collect. So it's Remeir. Uktani, and what's the last case saying? Ksubas isha, the ksuba of a woman, that if it doesn't have achrayis, you cannot collect from the chas meshabadim. So you see, the Remeir does not differentiate between the regular shtar chayv and the ksubas isha, that even by ksubas isha, you cannot collect from the chas meshabadim if you didn't write achrayis. So we're back to the question. Obviously, our Mishnah, you can't say kula remehi. We wanted to answer and say, it's a contradiction. The Reish of the Mishnah that says you have to have a ksuba of 200, you cannot be meichel on you, that's Remeir. The Sefer that says that if you didn't write achrayis, we'll say, it's tell you Sefer, all your property is going to be indebted. That's Rabbi Yehuda, not Remeir. So we wanted to say, no, maybe Remeir would hold that when we say achrayis lav tell you Sefer, that's by regular shtar. But by ksuba, it's my best and whatever, that would be considered tell you Sefer. Of course you could collect. But we see clearly from this brisa that it must be Remeir, because he holds a shtar chayv that has no achrayis cannot be collected, and he says the same thing makes ksubas isha also. So who's the town of the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Iba Yisem, if you want, you can say that the Mishnah is Remeir. Iba Yisem, if you want, you can say the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. It could be both. How? So the Gemara explains. Iba Yisem, Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, because Hassam over there, the case that we brought to prove that Remeir is the only one who holds that you cannot have a ksuba less than 200. Rabbi Yehuda holds you could have, because we quoted you a case that if, let's say, he writes to her, okay, here's a ksuba of 200, and she writes back a receipt, you already paid me on 100, which she didn't. That's allowed to be done. That sounds not like the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no. Over there is kasvele his kabalti, because she wrote to him a receipt of I received 100, even though she didn't. So then you're allowed to be without a ksuba of 200, you're allowed to be with ksuba of 100. Hachalei kasvele his kabalti. Here she didn't write to him I received. So what our Mishnah is going to tell us is that even though he didn't write for our ksuba, we don't say that she was moichel on that. Rather, we say that she was relying on the Tarkan's blessing, because everyone knows to be a married woman, she has a ksuba. But if she would write to skabalti, if she actually was moichel, of course, our Mishnah would agree that you could be moichel, and therefore it could be like a Yehuda. So therefore, the Sefer we know is like a Yehuda, and the Risha could be like a Yehuda too. Or anybody said what you could say, the whole Mishnah is Remeir. Because my chayim diktani, what does it mean when we said the Sefer? And this was important when we were saying the words over the Amud Aleph. We were saying that it sounded like the Mishnah is not like Remeir. Why? Because the Mishnah was saying that if the husband doesn't write in the ksuba, kol nechosa achrei lechoch, all my properties are responsible. It doesn't make a difference. You're chayiv. So we assumed chayiv meant to say, as if it was written achrayis in the ksuba, even though he didn't write it, because achrayis is still a sefer. So that's not like Remeir. Because Remeir you cannot collect from the chas mishabat. No, only collect from the chas nechayim. Says the Gemara, no. You know what it means when we said chayiv in achrayis nechasim? It means mina machoradet. Means from his available properties. Meaning, even though he didn't write for her achrayis, of all his properties, only wrote that you collect from this one field, it's a stipulation of the court that no, all his properties are responsible when he has them. But if he sells them, she cannot collect from the lekuches because it's not written in the document. And we don't say achrayis to cycle. So the wording of that, all his nechasim achrayim, doesn't mean, let's say, in the classic sense of that, okay, even if he sells it all. No, that you cannot collect. It means when it's available. So although he said, when you get divorced, you'll get that field. No, buddy. What I can pick, whatever. I have all your stuff. I have a choice to getting from. That's what the halacha of Remeir was, of the Mishnah was being said. And that could be even like Remeir, and it doesn't have to be like. So our Mishnah could be either Remeir or like Remeir. Now the Mishnah continued and said, like Kasub Lavahula, let's say he did not write the heart, and if you get taken in captivity, then I'm going to redeem you. You said it doesn't make a difference. It's a Tanai Bezdin, you're going to be forced to redeem her from captivity. Now the Gemara brings a halacha that's going to relate back to this halacha in the Mishnah. Amar Buddha Shmuel, the father Shmuel said the following halacha: Eish Yisrael Shenense, if a wife of Yisrael was raped, so Asur Labala, could have been her husband, which is interesting because we know that the woman was violated, she's permitted. It says no, she's forbidden to her husband. You know why? Cheshinan, we're concerned, Shemet Chilasa, maybe the beginning of the bia was ba'inus. Maybe she was being forced. But Vesaifa, maybe at the end of the bia, Beratzain, maybe she ended up enjoying it and she wants it. And therefore, we have to be concerned that she was Mizana Beratzain, and therefore, she's been forbidden to her husband. Which Taisa says, I would Esther Hamalka. Why was she forbidden to Mordechai? He says, no, she was a tzedekes gemara. That we're not concerned for. But a regular woman, even if she was violated, she's forbidden to her husband because maybe it's baratzin. And that's an isser of Eishes Ish, where she was mizana. Now, later on the Gemara is going to ask, then what's the case that the Torah tells you, if a woman was raped, that she's permitted to her husband? When do you ever have such a case? If you tell me you're always concerned that maybe she did a baratzin. But that's what Father Shmuel says. Now, Eisvei Rav Lavud Shmuel. Rav asked to this teaching Lavud Shmuel from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said one of the obligations of the Kesuba is im tishtabai, that if you get taken captivity, Afrikinach, and even if you didn't write this, you're obligated to this. I will redeem you, and I'll take you back as a wife. Take you back as a wife? How can you take her back as a wife? If you tell me every woman that's taken captivity and therefore she's violated is going to be forbidden to her husband. So Ishtik, the father's move was quiet, didn't answer. So Kari Rav recited Alei Davud Shmuel regarding the father Shmuel Pasuk Niyam. Sudden Otzru B'milim. The ministers are closing of the words. They hold back the words. The kafi simulapim, and they put a palm on their mouth, meaning like they don't know what to say, they don't know what to answer. So the Gemara says, "Ma'isli, what should have he answered?" It seemingly does refute him. What should he have answered? So the Gemara says, "No, he should have answered b'shvuyi hikilo, that by the captive woman they were lenient, and they weren't concerned over there. You know why? Because they didn't even see her having bia. When did we say that any time that even if she was violated, we're going to say she was been to her husband, is when we see there's a rape going on. Then we're concerned that maybe Besaifa was Baratzin. But the captive woman, we don't even know. We're concerned, we suspect that the idolaters are going to go out and violate a woman. But that's a suspicion, based on a suspicion. A, did they violate her? And B, did she have Baratzin? So he could have answered B'shvuya Hikilo. By a captive woman, yes, there he could take her back as a wife. He didn't answer that, so he's saying a pasuk, like as if he didn't know what to say, but he could have had an answer. Even though he holds that any time she was violated, she's asla lala, but by shvu you could have been more lenient because you don't know for sure even that she was even violated. You suspect, and then you suspect maybe that she was done with us. So that's what he could have answered. But okay, but the Gemara continues to ask and says, Labu de Shmuel, according to the teaching of the father Shmuel, that every woman who's violated is forbidden to her husband. The Torah explicitly mentions that if a woman was violated, that she's going to be permitted. But how she permitted? Every einus is maybe b'seifer baratzin. Maybe she wanted it at the end. So it says the Gemara, we're told in the Kame Edom, where, for example, where the witnesses say, "Shetzvacha mitchila ad seif," where she was screaming from the beginning to the end. So obviously there was no ratzin over there, and then she's going to be muteres labal. But a regular woman, we don't know. Maybe it was done baratzin, maybe she was mizana, and therefore should be forbidden. But the Gemara says the pligi de Rabbi. This teaching of the father Shmuel disagrees with Rabbi, because the Amar Rabbi disagrees. He says, Kol shetchilasa ba'aynes v'sayf baratzin. He says, actually, more than the opposite. The teaching of the father Shmuel was that we're concerned that maybe it was baratzin, and for that concern, okay, it was on. Even though at the beginning you were forced and they forced whatever. He says no. Even if you know the end was baratzin, and he says his words are she says leave him. I want this. Shalmali niskikla, because even if he wouldn't force her, she would hire him for his services. Even so, Mutera, she's permitted to the husband. Says, my time. What are you talking about? She's like, I want this. Get out. Don't save me. Says the Gemara, a very interesting concept that's often quoted. What's called Yetzer al Bishar. He clothed her with desire. That's also considered forced, because the beginning of when he violated her, he then gave her this desire. What? Well, it's not so much mafata would be forbidden. The married woman that was seduced would be forbidden to her husband. Here, the heter labal is only when she's forced, when she's violated, when she's raped. here, although the beginning was that he forced her, when she subsequently wants it, according to Rava, that is considered ba'oinus. So obviously with addictions, with different things, you could understand how people would quote this Gemara of Yitzhak al-Bashar, that this is not something that I really want. But now this desire was forced upon me. I was clothed in desire. Says Rava, you're an oinus, and you're going to be muteres labal.
She didn't have full ratzon really in it. That's probably why she got lost into it.
Right. I'm saying now she wants. She's like, I get away. I would even hire him. I would pay him $100 to stay here now. Right? So she's doing it baratzon. Says Rava, does haste nishratzon, does haste oinus. Big chiddush. Psychologically, what does that mean? And what does that mean for people that say, whatever, it's ba'inus, what do you mean? You're doing this willingly? No, I have no control. I was brought into this situation. So that's what Rava is saying. And he must have telling you say that Rava. We have a brace that says like Rava. Pas says Mamidbar regarding the Saita, regarding the suspected adulterous woman, about if she's Mazana as Aisha Sish. The pasuk says, "He loinis fasa," and she was not forced. So that's the type of woman that becomes forbidden to her husband. That's when she's asur, she's forbidden. Now, the inference is honit fasa. If she was grabbed, if she was forced, then metacha she'd be permitted to her husband. But now the Gemara makes a diuk. The words in the pasuk are v'hiloinas fasa. He, she, is always an exclusionary terminology, meaning she. Meaning a regular woman, that's when I said the reason why she's forbidden is dependent on because she wasn't forced. But if she was forced, she'd be permitted. Now it sounds like but there will be another woman that even if she wasn't forced, even if she did it willingly, she's permitted to her husband. Because this woman, it depends if it was willingly or not. But there sounds like there's another woman, not the he, that would be permitted even if she did baratzin. The what case is that? Says the Rice, which exactly what Rava said. Even if she subsequently does it, but if it's tar of ba'oinus, she's going to be permitted to her husband. So the Brisa says the same principle as Rava. So we have a Brisa that supports him that says is going to be permitted. Now, once we introduce this diuk of a he, like nitvasa, the Gemara brings many different interpretations in this Brisa, in this pasuk of a he, like nitvasa. Tani to learn another Brisa, a very different halacha, actually the other way around. The pasuk said the he, like nitvasa. The woman wasn't forced, so then she's a saita, then she's a sucha, she's been to her husband. She did it willingly, she was mazana. Hamitfasa, muteras, but the diik obviously is, but if she was forced, she's permitted. Now, the word vehi tells you, this is where we say this halacha. Now, there's two ways of looking at this way we look at it. There's two cases. There's the one that was forced, is permitted, not forced, is forbidden. The first drasha we made was on the not forced, meaning when you did it willingly. This one, when she does it willingly, she's forbidden. Another woman, even if she does it willingly, will be permitted. Which case is that? This price goes on the other variable. You have another woman. It's only this woman that we're talking about the pasuk. When she's forced, she's permitted. There's another woman, even when she's forced, that she will be forbidden to her husband. The Eizoi, what case is that? That's the source of the halacha, that you could have a woman that's violated and she's still forbidden to her husband. Who's that? That's Eisha's kain. So again, on the different cases, this price is going in the other case of this vehi. On the case of ba'oinus, although generally say ba'oinus she's muteres labad, you can have a case of ba'oinus that she's asuch labad, that's Eisha's kain. Another interpretation, I'm going to read the Mishmul. He says Mishum Bishmul and then Bishmul. It says in the pasuk vehi le'nitfasa she wasn't forced, then that's why she's forbidden. She did it willingly. Hanatfasa muteres again, but if she did it, if she was forced, then she's permitted. But V'yeshlach says Rabbi Shmuel, there's another woman. Sha'af b'shloy nitfasa, although she wasn't forced, mutar should be permitted. Now, we already said a case, which was the one we supported for Rava, of chalas b'aynis v'zeh b'chatzim. He brings a different case, that even if she wasn't forced, she did it willingly, she's going to be permitted to her husband. Which case is that? That's kedushay tos. If her engagement was in error, meaning, let's say there was a condition stipulated for the kedushin, and the condition was never fulfilled. If this woman was mezana when she was married to this man, who subsequently turns out that she was never married because the kedushin was in error, she's going to be permitted to her husband, because she was never married to him. She was always a single girl. So you could have a case of a wife that's doing it willingly, but still permitted to her husband, when the case is kedusha tais. Even if she has her son riding on her shoulder, she could still refuse and walk out of this marriage because she was never really married. It was kedusha tais. And therefore that could be a case that she's mazan baratzim and she's still going to be permitted to her husband. Now, related to this discussion regarding when the woman was forced and these nus, that she's permitted to her husband, so I remember Yehuda says, Hani nashi digon buganavi. Regarding these women, that the bandits steal the wives from their husbands, shadin leguvrai, they're still going to be permitted to their husbands. Why? Because they're raped by these bandits, and therefore they're still permitted to their husbands. Now, this was Rabbi Yehuda's teaching. So the rabbis asked Rabbi Yehuda, he says, wait a second, how can you say that? But we see when these women who were taken by the bandits, they bring to those bandits bread and food. Obviously they want to be here with these men. So they're doing it baratzin. So how can they be permitted when they're finally released and they take the hostage, they go and they make these, they do what it takes, whatever their demands are, and they say, go back to your husbands? What do you mean? For those few months they were coming and making and cooking and baking for them. Obviously they wanted that relationship.
Stockholm syndrome.
Well, yeah, so you have to know, is that class of eines v'zayim baratzin? You have to know. If that would be that they really want to, would that be tchalas of eines v'zayim baratzin? That would be the same thing, that you wanted, but it was originally foisted on you. But Akabama here, the Gemara says that no, they really, sounds like they really want it. They want, no, that's machmas dira. That's because they're fear. They're only making the food and cooking and baking and fishing or whatever because they're afraid. Says the Gemara, yeah, but says, what do you mean? When they're fighting their wars, they actually prepare and they give them their arrows to shoot. So you see that for sure are helping them because they want their husbands, the new husbands, to win. See, well, that's also machmasiyah. That's only because they're afraid. If they don't provide for them the bullets, they're going to shoot them. But the Gemara does say, vadai, for sure in the case of shavkinu, if let's say the thieves leave them and say, you could go free, we're leaving for the day, we're going out hunting, you guys could go back home if you want to. And the azam and avshayu, but they on their own go back to the bandits, then asira. Then they're forbidden to husband. That's clearly not doing out of fear, because you guys could go, and we're leaving you in town, you guys could walk, and they come back to them, that's going to be for sure doing maratz, and then they're going to be forbidden. Continue on this theme regarding the bandits, and regarding the case of the captive women. So then the Bryce is shvuyi malchus. If women that are taken into captivity from the king, because the king wants to be intimate with them, the halacha is harein k'shvuyin. They have the halachic status of captive women, meaning that they're permitted to their husbands, like we learned in the Mishnah. We said that if you're taken captivity by svinach li into, I mean, they take you back as a wife, we would presume that the woman was forced and therefore she's permitted to her husband. Whereas genuvi listois, but if let's say bandits steal the woman, they're not like captive women, and they're presumed to have done the baratzin, and they can be forbidden to the husband. Says the Gemara, a Bryce that says the exact opposite. The Bryce says if you're stolen by a bandit, you're going to be like shvuyin, and you're stolen by the king, you're not going to be like shvuyin, and you're going to be astal about it. So which Bryce is right? The Gemara says it's not a contradiction. Malchus are malchus like kasha. Let's first resolve the case of the king. We had one Bryce that says if you're taken captive by the king to have intimacy, then you are shvuyin. The other one says you're not shvuyin. It depends. Depends which kingdom. Ha b'malchus Achashverosh. Someone like Achashverosh, that he took all the women of the world, and for sleeping, for intimacy, that's like captivity. And she's going to be permitted to her husband. You know why? Achashverosh was a big king. Every woman knew that she's not getting married to him, and that he's just doing the bia b'ainis. He's just doing it for himself. So that's considered b'ainis, so you can be permitted to your husband. Oh, but Haba Malchus Ben Netzer. Ben Netzer was a bandit. He would capture cities, and he would rule over them. And he was the one in charge of all the bandits. Now, regarding him is where we said that if you're shvuyi malchus, if you were taken captive by such a king, then you're not like a shvuya, meaning you're going to be forbidden to your husband. Why? Because that woman thinks, oh, he's going to marry me. I'm going to be the princess because he's not the king of the world. He's a bandit. And it's like he found favor in me. Every woman thinks that, oh, I'm the one, I'm the princess. And then she becomes forbidden to her husband because she's doing a baratzah. And listus lekash, also not difficult in the case of the bandit, which if you're taken captive by bandit, are you like a shvuy or not like a shvuy, you're permitted to your husband or not, it's not difficult because hobe ben netzer. By ben netzer, if he was the bandit that took the woman, she's forbidden to her husband. Like we said, because she thinks that he's going to marry me and I'm going to be the wife of the king. Ha balistim da'am. But when do we say if you take captive by bandit, you're going to be permitted to your husband? Is with a regular bandit, where even just by regular bandit being taken to them is difficult for them, because no one wants to be the wife of a bandit. So even the regular wife of a bandit doesn't want to be there. So for sure, that's considered as an oinus. But the Gemara asks, wait a second. Uven Netzer, this Ben Netzer, Hasam Karli Melech. In the first, you told me he's considered a Melech. Because you told me that's the case of the Melech that should be Asur Labalak, should doing Baratzah. V'hacham Karli Listim, but here you tell me he's called the bandit. That he's the case of the bandit that is going to be forbidden. Meaning we had two brises. Each brise said the case of a king and a bandit. But they said the opposites. They said that, like one brise said that the king is going to be asa and the bandit is going to be mutter. Other one said the other way around. The bandit is going to be asa and the king is going to be mutter. So which one is it? We said, no, not difficult. They're two different braces. One's one type of melech, like a chashvesh, the other one's ben netz. And one brace is bandit, is ben netz, the other one's a regular bandit. But you tell me in one brace you're calling the bandit ben netzer, and the other brace you tell me he's the melech. And that the listim is listim de alma. So is he bandit or is he king? How are you qualifying him? Says the Gemara, it's not a difficulty. Yes, gabe achashverosh listim hu. If you're comparing him to Achashverosh, he's a bandit. Who are you? Who do you think you are? What do you capture a few cities? Yes, I'm a listim. But gabe listim di alma melechu. But comparing him to a regular bandit, he's a king. So therefore, the first brisa that was talking about the kingdom of Achashverosh, which we said that a melech like Achashverosh, the halach is going to be that you can be muteres labala because no one thinks she's becoming the wife of Achashverosh. She's a nenza. Oh, in contrast to him, we call him ben netzer, a thief, a bandit. You can't call him a king. He's not in the same category at all. Say a guy's a wealthy guy, right? Because he has $10 in his pocket and everyone else has $1. You can't compare him to a guy who has billions of dollars. You call him like just a guy with a petty chain. The Bryce that said the opposite, where we're talking about in regards to regular bandits, we're calling Ben Netzer the Shvuye of Malchus. So it's not a difficulty why one Bryce we're calling him the Melech, one we're calling him the Listim, because one is comparing him to Melech HaChashverosh. We call him the Listim. Then we're saying he's always the case that's awesome, because everyone wants to be his wife because they think, oh, this guy's got money, he's got Peter Pan. I know what this guy's doing. He takes over a city, and so that's the one that you can be usher. One we're calling him the Listim, and one we're calling him the Melech. And then the other two cases are the one that's going to be permitted. The Melech HaChashverosh, your Nensa, because no one thinks he's becoming a wife. And the regular Listim, no one wants to be such a wife. And therefore, those are the cases that are going to be Moteres L'Baal. Thank you for any time.